Welcome, everybody, to Before the Commit, episode 21. This week, I will be eating my tongue, biting my tongue. Claude Code is not open source, but open code is. We'll also be talking about a new offering from Anthropic called Claude Cowork. Loser Noise, we'll talk about how Base 44 might be the Salesforce killer. And in the Kill 'em chain, we'll be talking about something called the first clone attack. With me, as usual, have my friend, Dustin Hilgartner. Hey, Dustin, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm tired. Yeah. I'm ready for the winter to be over.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot nicer over here in Austin than it is over there.
Yeah. It did not quit. Yeah, this has been a cold winter in New Jersey. So before we get into it, I stumbled upon this news from OpenAI that they're going to start running ads inside of the chat. I think we called this. I'm kind of surprised it happened, So OpenAI is going to begin testing ads in their free and Go tier. Go is like their low cost subscription tier in the United States. And basically, they are going to say a few things. The ads are not going to influence the answers ChatGPT gives you. They're going to keep your conversations private, not sell data to advertisers, control how your data is used, and you could turn off certain things. Yeah. So, I mean, basically, like if you look at the image, it, let's see if I could share it. Let's see. So in the image, you can kind of see the ad is outside the chat. So, I mean, I guess somehow they are going to, they have to know what you're talking about in order to serve you up the right ads. And I'm sure that they will share some information with the advertisers about impressions, because that's how advertisement works. But they might anonymize some details about what you were looking for. I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, when I read it sounded in line with the way I thought you would have to do it if you were going to go down that route. I mean, to be fair, when Google added their chatbot to google.com, I mean, they have advertising there, and I'm not sure if it's really clear how much that is integrated with their chatbot or with Gemini, etc. My personal opinion, though, is that, like you said, it's a slippery slope. I believe that the world is driven by incentives.
Right.
And, the reason why Costco operates different than a regular supermarket in terms of how much they lean in the favor of the consumer as opposed to the various vendors is because Costco their incentives are all in line for keeping, what matters to them is the membership, not whether they sell any products on the shelf. And you can see that incentive when you go there because, you could basically return anything for any reason, like a crazy amount of time later. Like you could have a TV for 6 months and return it or something like that, and they'll take it. Because to them, their incentives are completely aligned with the consumer, their members, as opposed to the vendors. Whereas if you go to a normal supermarket, it's kind of like they have dual incentives, right? Do they put the best product on the shelf, or do they give you the one that has the highest margins for them? So anyway, to take it back to this, I think that it squarely puts, and by the way, this has been my criticism of Google for decades now. And one of the reasons why, if I can, I don't use Google products. Like, for instance, I don't use google.com. I use other search engines with the hope that they're not taking my data. Like, I think I've used DuckDuckGo and other types of things. Of course, I use Gmail, so I'm a little bit of a hypocrite there.
So I think what concerns me more, yeah, sure, for sure, the the privacy stuff and the slippery slope is like the better data you could sell an advertiser about what your market is, the more attractive your platform becomes for and our point was, I think if you go back like to episode like 2 or 3 back from the summer, we talked about like as more and more traffic is not in places like Google and social media and people are spending more time somewhere else, that's naturally where advertisers will go. It's why the Super Bowl, the cost per minute for a commercial is so high, because it's a huge audience that's watching that for that one period of time. Yeah. So you're paying for impressions, you're paying for conversions, and OpenAI, the market for OpenAI right now might be subscriptions. But once they start seeing that they can monetize, the impressions and I worry that, not only OpenAI does this, but this becomes a trend in LLMs and chatbots. And I mean, Google's been doing this. They integrated Gemini into the search, like, but okay, like that's not really that novel. Like, I mean, these are LLMs that people go to that do stuff. Like, imagine using Claude Code and you're starting to get ads in Claude Code for like whatever. So, and then I have a follow up to this point, but yeah, I'm curious to hear what you think about.
I mean, I really kind of got to wrap my head around it a little bit, because they say they're not going to sell your data, but if the advertiser can target a person who's read this book and then you pop up on their website coming from ChatGPT, they did kind of sell your data, because now they know you read that book, right? So it's a slippery slope, and I guess the devil's in the details. Maybe there's something about the details that negates what I just said. But like, remember, this is just the first terms of service, right? If you look at how Facebook and other companies have evolved over time, they started with the great terms of service, and then 5 years later and a bunch of accept terms of services later, they're a completely different company, completely selling your data all over the place.
Yeah, so, you're no longer the consumer. Like, you're no longer the market. Like, first off, people typically aren't paying for Facebook. So like in the beginning, the monetization strategy was like critical mass, but like Facebook wasn't profitable. They went public, they started selling ads. Sure, they have a subscription-based model, but most people don't use it. Once OpenAI, who's struggling to be profitable and is losing a battle, like you could see they're clutching at straws. They are the first ones sort of doing this, like of the big 4 or so. What is their incentive for protecting your data and protecting your privacy? You're not paying the bills, You're barely helping them, break even at this point.
And remember also that if things don't go too well for ChatGPT and they get bought up by somebody else, that somebody else is going to get all the data and may not feel, they may feel that the reason why they bought it was because they don't want to abide by those original terms of services. They want to go more in the Facebook route and have infinite sliceability. And the reason why Facebook makes so much money in advertising is because they know everything about you, and they're essentially selling the access to that data. So, Sam Altman, would
To
have to
that
not
point,
only
to that
maintain
point,
control of the company, but be completely have a bunch of integrity and never go back on it. And I just haven't seen that up until this point.
yeah, and to that point, I don't know if you saw this, but I think it was yesterday, Elon Musk filed a lawsuit against Sam Altman for apparently wrongful gains for a nonprofit organization. He had made a several $1 million investment. He's seeking damages to what would be equivalent if it were a for-profit company, which it is now,
Mhm.
of $134 billion. So yeah, there's
I mean,
certainly
his board revolted at one point against him, and I think the reasoning they used for that was they felt like they couldn't trust him.
Mhm.
So that's an accusation. It's not, I don't want to tar and feather him, but there's smoke there.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, it's it's something that I'm not too happy about, but I don't use ChatGPT at this point, so it's not something I really care about or affects me very much. And unless they come out with something wildly amazing where I can't get away from it, I doubt I go back to ChatGPT, or I'm less likely to go back to ChatGPT now than I was before.
Mhm.
And it was pretty low
You,
percentage wise as it is.
yeah, if you remember, like back in like the late early 2000s, like Yahoo was like the place people went to go search for stuff. Like it was the kind of search engine, and like Google kind of came out of nowhere and won with its simplicity. There weren't ads there in the beginning. It was very, here you search for something, their thing was search, and it was cool. It was different, and they took over the whole entire search market. I wonder if, in ChatGPT's quest to, it's like Netscape trying to monetize,
Mhm.
like at the very end, like Gemini or Grok or Claude, maybe don't need to do that. And people, ChatGPT, what they have going for them still is that they're a household name, right? They were the
Mhm.
first, people know who they are, but that sort of kind of flag in the ground isn't going to be useful much longer when you start putting ads in front of people. People will look for alternatives. Oh, like use this one, there's no ads. And you're
Yeah.
doing it for the free tier. You're doing it
Mhm.
for the place where most people probably use you as you know, as like their Google, right? Their sort of go-to. And most people probably don't pay for Chat GPT. I would say more people don't pay for it than do pay for it. And with Google starting to offer more and more things like for free, like their fast model for Gemini 3, I wonder if they sign their own death warrant by doing this.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And by the way, I mean, there's nothing, I guess, morally or legally wrong with this. I mean,
Yeah.
this business model exists all over the place, so I'm not necessarily saying that. It's
Yeah.
just that I believe that incentives eventually align with what you end up doing, and I think that you know I think that's what's going to end up happening here. I mean, it's the same thing. Like if I watch a television channel, like a news station, and then they have an ad running in between the news segment, I'm pretty sure they're not going to come back from the news segment and talk about a bad story about that company, right? It's because it's their customer. So you always have to be aware of the incentives structure of what you're using. And then if you're aware with it, it's fine to use it. You just have to make your own decision about whether that's worth it or not for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think that'll be the case here as well.
Yeah, you might want to start marketing like your box that blocks LLM ads. Might want to get on that. Your pie hole or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
The ads, but it doesn't block you from getting their data. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So let's talk about the tool of the week. So this last week, I made some crazy claims that Claude Code was open source. It's been
I was so
corrected.
excited. I immediately got off the podcast and started going looking for the open source Claude Code, and I didn't find it. What I did find was, to be fair to you, there is a Claude Code repository that Anthropic has that is open source, but it's kind of like their outer onion of like plugins, communities type of stuff. It doesn't actually contain the Claude Code code. I was watching another podcast. I think it was like Theo from T3, and he's been really coming down on Anthropic to open source Claude Code. He says, why wouldn't you at this point, right? Well, I'd love for them to make it open source, but I know exactly why they won't. It's because the application layer is so valuable. I think that's where a lot, when these LLMs start to commoditize, I think that these companies are going to be in the application space, and that's where they're going to be making a lot of their money. And I think Claude is a perfect example of that.
But I also see it as why else? I use Anthropic models as my primary models these days. Like, I have everything hooked up to projects, and I use Claude Code for other things other than writing code now.
Yeah.
For them, the value of Claude Code is certainly great intellectual property, but the other value is that you're forced to use their models, and you're forced to then pay to use their models. So I look at as something like Claude Code as a way to just it's a token eater, right? So anything that's going to eat lots of tokens is going to inherently make you spend more money. Part of that might be not to optimize it, not to make it be better. It's in their best interest to do lots of tool calling. Not to say they would do that, but so
it's like you invented the bullet.
Go ahead.
Like you invented the bullet, and then you also created a machine gun, right, to shoot the bullets really fast so that you can sell more of them.
Right.
And the bullet's going to commoditize, but the machine gun is still generating a lot of cash for you, particularly if it only is allowed to use your bullets. So
it's not in their best interest to open source it for that reason as well. Forget about the IP of what it's doing, and you could reverse engineer it. I'm not suggesting anybody do that, but if you set up an LLM proxy, you can kind of see what it's doing. You could look at the logs and look at the tool calling. It's not like a panacea, but you could create. And people do. They create their own versions of these things, and so yeah.
Now to segue a little bit into the tool, one of the tools of the week, open code. This may be what Theo's talking about, which is, I was very surprised when I used open code for the first time. It's actually very, very good. And I would say, and I want to be fair to Kilo Code, which we evaluated in episode 1, and it was awesome in episode 1. And that was a long time ago when the tools weren't as great. So I imagine that they've probably gotten a lot better, and I should probably reevaluate them as well.
6 months ago, it's a long time ago now in this world.
So what's kind of happened, and I know we talk about a lot of tools and we're, evaluating everything, but it's still hard there's still areas where we're not shining our flashlight on, and then activities happening in those shadows that we don't know about until maybe a couple of months later. And one of those has been open code. And also what's been going on in the background is that Grok gave out Grok Code Fast for free for many, many, many months, right?
I remember that.
It's been a long time. In fact, I think they're stopping a week or so, or days from now, I read. And that's made them rise up the charts. They got a lot of fanfare. They were like, we're the most used model in Kilo Code. We're the most used model on open code. Yeah, because it's free. So, because of that, I kind of discounted it a little bit, but I kind of probably have to apologize, because after using Grok Code Fast on open code, I really do think that it's in the same ballpark as Claude Code. I think Claude Code is got some things dialed in a little bit better, but man, Grok Code Fast is just so fast. You know what I mean? It's, whereas when Claude is working, you're kind of watching it as it goes, usually, and you gain trust with it over time because you're seeing it go through its thought process. I think it one shots things more often. But man, Grok Code Fast is so fast that even if it doesn't one shot it, it's like it's spinning so fast that it just like it'll go through 3 or 4 attempts on something in the same amount of time that Claude would make one attempt. And I may even be selling it short because it's even faster than that. I mean, I had to study a code base. I opened up Open Code, and the first thing I did was had it study a code base.
What do you usually do to execute that, by the way? Are you doing like I know like in Claude, you could run like the init command and it'll go and create a claude.md file.
That's a good point, actually, because I did not do the init command in Open Code. However, that repo, because I use Claude Code, it has a Claude MD. So you can imagine that even Claude in Open Code probably had a little bit of an advantage because it knew its Claude MD was there, even though Grok probably looks at it too. But anyway, in Open Code, which curiously still lets me use my Claude Max subscription. So hopefully I don't get banned, because I know there's been like some back and forth between Anthropic on that. So I was a little bit surprised when it had that option. And then when you choose it, like you end up on an Anthropic page and they're giving you a key and telling you to copy it. So I'm like, are they allowing this or not? It seems weird. They have a page for it. So anyway, I tell Claude to study my project, tell me everything about it, make suggestions. And it takes probably like, the typical amount of time. It studies thoroughly. It takes like 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes, comes back, has a great analysis. And then I cleared my session, no context, etc. And I asked Grok Code Fast to do the same thing. That sucker looked at all of my files, came back with an analysis that was at the same level as Claude. Maybe you could even argue was a little bit better. I'm not sure. It's debatable.
Did you do an apples to apples comparison? Like, did you look at like is it the speed of the tool, like Claude Code v like Open Code, and then do a comparison? Like, obviously you can't compare like Grok to usage in Claude Code, but like, did you get a sense that it's more than just the tool, or is it a combination of the tool and the model? Like, did you notice that like Claude Code?
Well, I knew that Grok. I had used Grok Code Fast in the past with Cursor when it first came out because I wanted to see what it was like, and it was just as fast back then. So
gotcha.
It's kind of just reminding me how fast it is. But back then, I don't know if it was Cursor or if it was the immaturity of Grok Code Fast because it just came out. It was fast, but like it was stumbling upon a lot of tool calls, right? And at that point in time, I was kind of on my way out from Cursor for that reason as well, because it stumbled on tool calls all the time. And it was really when I discovered, quite some time ago, maybe 6 months or longer ago, that Claude Code was really the way to go because they had it dialed in on the tool calling. And this was back in like Sonnet 3.5 or 3.7 or something like that. It was great back then. I mean, it wasn't perfect. Then 4.5 came out, and then Opus came out, and Opus is just amazing as well. It's just been getting better and better and better. But now here I am with Open Code and using Grok Code Fast. And I don't know, it must be that period where they, it was probably very smart for XAI to make Grok Code Fast free for quite some time. Because what I think they did by making it free, and then all the open source projects, like, the out there free projects like Kilo Code and Open Code, it became like everybody on those platforms was only using Grok Code Fast. And I think what that for many months, and I think what happened was that those open source projects started to conform their tool calling to how Grok they were doing what Claude Code was doing for Claude, for Claude. And I think that they've arrived at something that's close to what Claude Code is. I mean, I really need more time to evaluate it. I evaluated it for a week, so disclaimer there. But I've been pretty impressed. Like,
have you like switched like to using it from Claude Code, or you're just evaluating it?
It's a good question, and I think it's deeper than if one's slightly better than the other, it's hard to switch because there's like this built up, oh, I use Claude Code skills all the time, but then Open Code maybe doesn't have skills or it has something else. So there is stickiness to the products that may allow you may decide to stick with one product over the other, even though one is slightly better, because it's just not better enough to make you redo everything and rethink in a different way for that new product. But I'm considering it. I mean, now the one thing I like about Claude Code is I can, for sensitive detail, sensitive things, I can choose what provider. I can make it go to like GovCloud, Bedrock. I can sandbox. I can do a whole bunch of stuff with Claude Code. So maybe there's like more security around Claude Code that I really have to fully evaluate it for my own use case. But I got to tell you, like, it's making me think about evaluating it from that perspective. Whereas usually I use something for a week and then I'm like, okay, I'm done. I don't need to look at Cursor anymore.
I saw an interesting pattern today that I started thinking about it. And the pattern is like you use like a different like coding tool. Like for the example was using Codex CLI. And it was really from a cost savings perspective. But like I could see another reason you would use this pattern. And then it had the ability to like spawn a sub agent, but the sub agent was actually calling Claude Code. So I could imagine like you could take something like Grok and like gain all the benefits of like the tool calling and things like that, but then use Open Code as a sub agent for specific tasks that you might want to delegate to.
Yeah. And that's what I think I need to evaluate more is like, there's a lot to Claude Code. It's not just the, open it up in VS Code and code like that. Like, I think I've evaluated them both side by side in that way. But like, there's a deepness to the Claude Code. You got the SDK, you got Bash piping in, you got all kinds of ways you can use Claude Code, background agents, web, et cetera. So I don't know if Open Code has all those things yet. I haven't gotten down the rabbit hole yet. But I got to tell you, just apples to apples comparison in VS Code, it's very, very good. In fact, the UI of Open Code is better than Claude Code, because Claude Code is like a little bit wonky in the terminal. Like, it's always like scrolling up to the top and I have to scroll it back to the bottom again or do something. It's always like wigging out a little bit and then it gets better. Which is fine. It's not a big deal. But like, none of that happens with Open Code. It's all dialed in better. They kind of push you in the direction of using like Ghosty or one of these other terminal products that are better, which is probably part of the reason why their UI is more stable. But you can like, scroll back to your message, click on it, and it will give you context of like, do you want to revert to this? Do you want to fork from here? Which is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it's even got, just like Claude, it's got the built-in review. I could do a / review and it'll review my uncommitted stuff or review my PR or something like that. So and I haven't had any issues with it. And just to go back to what I was saying, to get to the punchline on it. I mean, I had Claude study this entire code base I had, and it took like 6 minutes. It came back with a thorough response. Grok Code looked at it, came back with a equally thorough response. But Grok Code Fast took 22 seconds.
Wow.
Just to give you an idea of how fast it is. So it is reading, and I'm not talking about 22 seconds because it didn't really look through all the files. No, it goes and reads through your files so fast that you can't even, like, you have to scroll back up to see what it did. And it methodically went through the whole entire project, looked at all the files. So it's just on a different level of speed that Claude and any of the other models are just nowhere near. Which is probably what they're using, Colossus for and all these big data centers that XAI built. They're just using it for pure speed. And, when I first used Grok Code, when it first came out, I didn't like the speed as much because it was going by so fast that I couldn't tell what it was doing. And then it would also make the mistakes that was pretty indicative of all the models back then. But now it's like up there on the level of like Sonnet or maybe even better. And it's that fast. So now you're like, wait a second, this fast is nice. Like I can go through a whole PRD in a minute or two, whereas Claude would have taken me in a half an hour or an hour to maybe get through the whole thing. So it's pretty impressive. So that's where I've gotten on open code. Very, very impressed.
Cool. Yeah, I just installed it while we were talking.
Wow.
To give it, just run the curl command.
I need to get an affiliate early. It's free though, so I'm sure their margin.
Yeah, you can have your ads.
$0.
You could display your ads in ChatGPT.
There you go. So sorry, I was just about to jump to another topic, but
I was going to ask you, can you touch on co-work?
Yeah, so I also looked at Cowork because it's getting a lot of press, and I think the story behind Cowork is it's one of these sort of incubator projects that they had internally that someone made. I think what they probably saw was how people are using Claude Code for things that are outside of coding, and there's a lot of non-software engineers who are probably, having issues with the fact that Claude Code is in the terminal and it's a coding agent, right, at its heart, even though we all use it for things outside of code. So what they did was they used the Claude Code SDK, the agent SDK, or I can't remember what they're calling it, where you can basically call Claude Code through Python.
Yep.
And I heard that in under a month, or I've heard all kinds of timelines that people have put to it, but I guess under a month they built Cowork. And I used it for a while. I think that, like I said, Claude Code has a lot of cool security features that let you, point it at Bedrock or something like that allows you to, maybe do more sensitive work and control where your data is going. I don't think you can do any of that with Cowork. It's more set up for like a general consumer. But what it does is it kind of locks you into like their secure environment. So for instance, in Claude Code, you can just run it on your machine loosey-goosey and have it do stuff. But most people who are power users in Claude Code are probably using Sandbox or dev containers or both to sort of lock down their environment more and make it feel more safe so they can put it into auto accept on tool calls and things like that, or allow it to have full bash commands because it's locked into it's sandboxed in a way that it can't go outside of the folders that you've given it access to. And so Cowork is kind of like if you enabled all those features and then built sort of a consumer UI around it. So you find it in Claude Desktop. So it's similar to Claude Desktop. And the first thing you have to do is you have to give it its scope, like its folder on your directory.
Yep.
And then it's locked into that folder. It won't go outside of that folder and do anything. So, some of the use cases I've seen is people have had it look at their downloads folder and organize it, or clean up their desktop, or do other types of tasks. You can have it build spreadsheets for you. What I did was I just recently had a child some time ago, and he's getting ready to start in a preschool. And one of the things he had to do is fill out this long, like 15-page form, and vaccination records and all that kind of stuff. And I was able to just put the form in a folder, go onto my pediatrician, save as the web page with all the vaccination information, put that in the folder, and told Claude Code to just go fill out the whole form for me. And it came back with a nice UI to ask me, give me multiple choice, or type in, as Claude Code does when it asks you questions. I really like that UI in Claude Code when it does a little wizard for how to.
Me too.
So you could just like say option number 2, or you can write in your own response.
Yep.
So it asked me a whole bunch of questions. I answered the questions, and then it filled out the whole form for me. I mean, that form probably would have taken me over an hour to go through and type in everything and blah, 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 blah. And it took me like 20 minutes to do with Cowork.
So can you,
pretty impressed.
So can you with Cowork, with Claude Desktop, can you select an Anthropic model that is hosted in like GovCloud, or are you like locked into using Anthropic's like hosted models?
I think you're locked in, but I need to really dig into those details. But it wasn't immediately clear to me that was an option. But maybe there's like, go in your home folder and go in the Cowork, and there's a JSON file and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Maybe there's that, but it's, I have to really dig into the details. But it didn't appear like that was really their intention. It's really for, if you're like a salesperson or an administrator, or you work in HR, or you're doing, you're not a software engineer, but you want these agentic tools, then Cowork is, I think, that's who they built it for.
I'm just thinking, like, you pointed to a folder, like it has recursive ability to read the folder. You could have documents in there that, it starts reading, and, you're sending context somewhere you don't want it to go. And I know with Claude Desktop, like, there's a config file that you can, like, one way to wire up MCP is not through the user interface. You can actually wire it up through the config file. Like, for example, if you want to run like an MCP server that's local to your system, you don't have to use the web UI. You can run like a local, like a Node.js based like MCP server that only you have access to, versus like a web-based one that Claude.ai has access to.
Yeah, so it is possible that maybe in that JSON file you could add, the GovCloud
Bedrock
details and point at something at, Bedrock. But yeah, I'll have to dig into those details and get back
so one
to
of
you on
the
that.
So I have a similar like setup, but I don't use Cowork. Obviously I'm going to play around with it. I have so I wrote an application called Ponder. I may have mentioned it last week. It actually went live yesterday. It's available if anybody wants to try it out. It's a 14-day free trial. It's basically my task management system. The goal wasn't to monetize it and like make like money off of it. It was just to better understand, like, could I write like an application, and like, what is it? Like, I never tried to monetize an app before. So I wanted to understand the Stripe integration. I wanted to understand, like, where would I market something like this? Is it Facebook? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Hacker News? Is it wherever it might be, just for my own knowledge, if in the future I want to monetize something.
So much easier to ship things now, right? Like,
so,
usually you would have stopped
easy
before you did the monetization, because you would have been using it internally. Oh, one day maybe I'll do this.
Yeah, it was just like, why not monetize it and figure out like how hard it is?
Yeah. No, I
like that. Yeah, so I basically like I'm like scratching all the itches that I would never scratch because like, you know, it's like, oh, like I'm embarrassed. You know, they say if you're not embarrassed of your beta, you waited too long to ship
Yeah.
it. So like, you know, there's like, you know, of course there's issues like, you know, people, you know, asked about privacy, like, you know, can you read my journal articles? Like, and you know, like, no, I can't. Like it has zero what is it called? Zero encryption, zero key encryption or whatever it is. Like I don't have access to your keys. There's a pin, like it uses like the same algorithm that Signal uses to determine
Mhm.
like how to decrypt data. But if you forget your pin, like your data is gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like I did all those things, and so I have like a shell script that runs on a laptop that stays open. And what the shell script does is it runs every 15 minutes, it wakes up and runs a Claude prompt that has access to the MCP server, that has
Mhm.
access to Ponder, that looks for things that are tagged a certain way, and it starts popping things off the queue. And then there's a separate repository it has access to, which is a location of coding repos. And repos could be like, for example, like I said, build this prototype. And it went and created a new repo, and it has access to GitHub. And it was able to create a new repo on GitHub, push it, and then also deploy it to render. So I was
Mhm.
able to, like, from my task management system, create a fully working prototype based off of a few sentences and deploy it to render and actually see it working. So
Mhm.
I see the value in something like Cowork, especially for somebody who doesn't know how to do what I know how to do, and being able to like rapidly iterate and create stuff on the fly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Like the things you would have never thought to build in the past, now you can build pretty easily, and you can really kind of thread the needle of what kind of product you really want. You know,
Yeah.
a good example is, I find now that there's so many things that are almost like locked in the past because they haven't woken up in this new world yet. Like, for instance, I'm using like Buffer to like schedule posts on social media. And, um, I get right up to the point where I'm like, do I upgrade so I can schedule more, or do I just build this thing myself? Because at first I was like, I would really like to use the Buffer API, but then I click on their developer area and they say that in order for me to get access to the API, I have to like fill out a form and they evaluate me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you may have just lost money because I'll just go build your thing tomorrow, you
Well, you
know?
can schedule yourself on LinkedIn. Like I do that. I don't, you know, I don't use some service. So
Yeah.
I would say that, yeah, you should build your own. It's not that
Yeah.
hard. Like the SaaS
Does
model
LinkedIn
is
have an API? I was
they
trying to,
have certain
they're very locked
APIs.
down.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah. No, they don't. I don't know that they have APIs for everything. Like, I'm curious how Buffer does it. Like, if they
It's
schedule it, and like, there's like a mechanical Turk that's actually scheduling your posts.
I was wondering about how Buffer did it because the first thing, of course, I looked into was like, okay, where's the LinkedIn API? Let me go figure out why would I use Buffer? I'll just build my own little scheduler. And I realized that there is no LinkedIn API, or it's like only for like special companies or something like that. You got to like get on their radar, and
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and then I realized that like LinkedIn really doesn't want you to like automate posts. Like you could do it through Zapier and IFFT or stuff like that, but it doesn't seem like the entry points that IFFT and uh, Zapier and Buffer have are publicly available for anybody who wants to. Maybe you have to buy a business account or something like that. I'm not sure, but they somehow get you roped into either buying something or being on an approved list. And then I was thinking to myself, like, wow, LinkedIn's in for a rude awakening when they figure out the future is that these AI agents, screw AIs. The AI agent, it could just go on the page, click through, and make the post for you, and it becomes like an API that actually uses LinkedIn and makes the post for you. So I think one way or another, uh, that wall will be broken down because, and I'll probably end up building my own thing.
Yeah. And yeah, to that point, it's getting easier and easier for people to build stuff rather than buy stuff. And, we've talked, maybe a few episodes ago about, maybe we didn't get too deep into it, but maybe SaaS is not going to die overnight, but like a different type of SaaS probably needs to be born. But like, for example, like Ponder's a good example of like, there's a million task management systems and like, you should build your own. Like you should build what makes sense for you. Like, or you should build a platform that's highly dynamic, like, where you can chat to it and it like conforms to a way that like the feature that you need doesn't need to exist because these are highly dynamic systems that conform in some sense to what you need. With that being said, there's a platform, there's a few of them out where there's Replit we've talked about, but Base 44 is a company that was acquired by Wix last year. Wix, of course, being this like marketing based platform for people to build websites. Essentially,
Like
it's just
Squarespace or something.
Yeah, they're like Square. They're like WordPress, like competitor. Like WordPress is more of an open source thing, but they have WordPress.com, and of course, WordPress is hosts like something like 80% of the websites in the world, and they have a very they have their own like redo, something called Gutenberg that like redid like how you create WordPress sites by dragging and dropping WYSIWYG interfaces. And anyway, there's more and more of these like sort of low code, no code type solutions that you go to somewhere, you get like a chat box, and you can basically build your application. So anyway, there was a post today on LinkedIn by the, you showed me this post. The CEO of Base 44 noted that there was a deal that went that that a customer had abandoned a 350K deal with building a Salesforce app in favor of using Base 44.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that SaaS is dead, but I think that that competition is about to ramp up, right? Because it's become a lot easier it's become a lot less sticky in the sense that because the build versus buy analysis up until this point has been, you want to keep your engineering team focused on building your product and your IP because engineering resources is the thing that is the most scarce in terms of like time and effort. And all software engineers know this because there's always like a backlog that's so big that you'll never finish it. And the product managers and sales folk are always looking for something faster than they can get it. So the bottleneck has always been software engineering for the most part. But now, that's been, let's say, divided, now it's 75, let's say it's 70% faster is like what, Anthropic is saying internally they've seen. And it may even be higher than that because, they were saying that it could be higher than that because they had also just not hired people. They had just leverage as their growth happened. They didn't hire as many people as they would have otherwise because their productivity was so high internally. So anyway, now I think that it's not that SaaS is dead. I think it's just that the equation has changed, right? The coefficient is different in the formula of build versus buy. And now it's not as painful to build something. So now if you're a SaaS company that's got something that's incredibly difficult to build with AI, then I think you're fine. Now you're still going to have competitors, startups that are going to be nipping at your heels, reproducing what you have if they think there's a lot of value there. So you're going to have people fast following with AI. But the idea that like someone might vertically integrate and build your product just to save themselves some money, you might be safe from if you have something that's incredibly difficult to do, right? if it's still going to take them months and months of time of their own engineers to rebuild it, then the build versus buy equation still is like, okay, let's use our engineers on things that are more important. But if you're a SaaS company and you look at your users and you see that most of your users are only using like some small subset of your SaaS product, and they could arguably reproduce that with AI in a couple of weeks, then I think you're going to see a lot of pain coming your way. And I think that this LinkedIn post about that Salesforce cancellation is exactly that example.
Yep.
Because Salesforce is incredible. So I think what you're going to see is a lot of SaaS products are going to drop in price. I think they're going to have to drop in price because they're going to have to get their build versus buy equation back in the right side of things.
I would say also like one of the models of SaaS is like the upsell, right?
Yeah.
Like years ago, I had an open source project called the SSO Wall of Shame. And the SSO Wall of Shame was a list of companies. You could find it on GitHub somewhere. But the SSO Wall of Shame was around companies that charged for SAML integration and SSO, which is like crazy when you think about it. Like, how dare you monetize something that makes your application more secure? Like, and it's like, this isn't hard to implement. Like, they were basically like trying to like sell it as a premium feature. Anyway, I archived the project because I met a guy that was doing the same thing and his list was way longer than mine. So we basically merged, and you could find the SSO wall of, I think it's sso.tax is the website that he had. Anyway, my point is like, you have these SaaS companies that are selling like, high, medium, low tiers, enterprise, like, and like, they're basically like the more like nicer integrations, the more tighter like capabilities, like they sell them off as a premium. And like when you start creating barriers for people to adopt like your platform by charging more money, people will start to realize like, oh, I could just go and build what I need, because you might not need feature like you have feature A, but B, C, and D, you don't need those. You just need E. And like, so you wind up upgrading just to get E, and you have all this other stuff that you don't really need. So then the decision build versus buy becomes like, well, I'll just build what I need for me and my business and just integrate it with the systems that I need. Like, I don't need the Zapier integration because I'll just integrate it with the API that like, or this back office system that there is no API for, I wind up building it for. So, you have a much better vertically integrated system that, will work better than anything you could ever buy off the shelf.
Yeah. And what I've heard is that, and I've heard this from multiple people who, are respected in the industry, that the pricing models will have to change now that AI is around, because you're no longer going to be able to charge per seat and these other types of strategies. You're going to have to charge per value added. Like actual, like, so you can imagine things are probably going to, just to give like a contrived example, it's probably going to be less about like monthly fee per seat of your employees. And it's going to be more like, this is how many tickets I've done, and that's what your cost is, right? Maybe that's not the right example, but it's going to be more metered billing about, so you're getting charged based on the value that's being added. And I think that's part of the problem with how SaaS works. Is SaaS is kind of like the same reason why you end up spending $15 on a hot dog at the football stadium. It's because you get locked inside, and then you get hungry, and then the only thing that's available is that. Well, once you walk in the front door of the SaaS product, now you're in. And now every additional upsell, you are not being charged based on the value it adds. You're being charged something much higher than the value it's actually going to be providing you. But you don't really have a choice because you're kind of trapped. And the leverage they have on you is the idea that it's like it's expensive if you leave
We have
the
your
stadium,
data. We have
right?
your
If you leave
data.
the stadium, you don't get to see the show. If you leave
Yeah.
the SaaS product, it's expensive because now you got to find another SaaS product or you got to build it yourself, and
And you have
all
to
of those
migrate.
options.
And you have to migrate. It's capital
All those
expense of
options
migrating.
are A, time consuming, and B, expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they you know, I don't want to say trap you, but it's almost like, you know, they call it stickiness, right? And I think that that's just not the right way to do business anymore. You know,
Right.
now what the SaaS products are going to find out is people can leave the stadium and still see the game and have a cheap hot dog, and it's not that big of a deal, you know?
Yeah.
And so if they're using 10% of your product, they're not trapped anymore. Now they have an off ramp.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're going to see a lot more often.
Yeah. I see two things I will predict for this year: an increase in M&A with companies that have similar product lines. I also see, because as a result of, you know, a broken sales model, right, or a sales model that needs correction, a reduction in margins, which will result in layoffs in some of these larger businesses, which ultimately requires an increase in M&A. So yeah, I do see the market being disrupted heavily because, um, you know, I have my own farm now. You know, I'm not going to the supermarket because it's cheaper for me to, you know, have my own chickens and, you know, grow my own beef. And I don't, you know, the prices are untenable. And, you know, with a team of internal software, if I'm a software company and has internal software engineers, you could have multiple projects running at the same time. You know, like you could, one engineer is capable of context switching, you know, pretty fast, you know, like working on 10 or 12 different projects simultaneously without really breaking a sweat.
I think this is a little bit off topic, but I just thought of it now. It's something that I've been watching happen, and it's similar to like the stickiness or the costs of something that you're involved in. I think that you're going to see a lot of this long tail legacy stuff like COBOL and C++ and all these things that are out there that, you know, it's like, oh, we got to hire this C++ guy because he's the only one that knows this thing. All those things are just going to be like converted to Rust really quick. You know, they're all going to be or some other language that makes sense.
What difference does it make what language it's in? Like, who cares? Because you have like an army of COBOL engineers at your disposal. Like, you don't need this. You need the AI specialist, not the COBOL specialist.
Yeah, your businesses are going to software companies or other companies that are maintaining these one or two people that are experts in something very ancient and are getting paid a lot of money because they're hard to find. I think that there's now going to be off ramps from those sort of trap situations as well. And the reason why I mentioned Rust is I think that Rust is actually going to become incredibly popular because it seems to be the thing that people are using to get C++ into the modern world.
It's a more secure language in terms of the security constructs of it are better built and bounded from the ground up. So it is a choice among people who are building things. I mean, you should build everything with it, perhaps, if security is important to you.
So I think you're going to see a lot of this legacy.
In fact, Tor is being rewritten in Rust right now. Just random fact. Yeah.
I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think you're going to see a lot of repos that would have never been ported get ported now.
And you might even see new programming languages that get invented. Like in the past, like the barrier to entry to creating a programming language was rather high. You can create a specialized programming language for a problem that you're solving that is unique to that problem, that you don't necessarily need to use something else. And like the LLM wrote it, so it knows exactly what it needs to do. It doesn't care about documentation because it created it.
Speaking of that, the reason why the Ralph Wiggum loop exists is because the sort of the creator of that loop, that concept, invented that method or that technique because he was writing a programming language and he wanted it to just keep on working on it
Interesting.
unlimited until it was done.
Interesting.
I think if I don't remember, if I remember correctly, it was like I think I even saw an article about it before Ralph Wiggum was even public, and it was this guy who wrote a. I apologize that it probably should have had his name ready, but he wrote a programming language that was using sort of like Gen Alpha or Gen X or sorry Gen Z, I guess, or I'm horrible at this. Alpha, using their terminology, like instead of like the programming language having a keyword, it would be like vibing or cap or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he did was he had an unlimited Ralph Wiggum loop, just continuing to plug along on it until it all became consistent, and it worked. So it's pretty cool.
So before we close out, I want to hit the kill 'em chain. This attack I'm calling the first clone attack. I don't know if I'm coining the term or it's a term that exists already, but essentially in today's sort of like world where people are committing code, like and just cloning it, right? Like you have open source repos and like people know that, hey, you're going to clone this repo and probably ask Claude, like, what does this repo do? And, because it's so easy, like to implant like the lingering LLM leak, like the ability to implant a hidden message in Unicode or, do some kind of stenography. Like you can essentially from the very beginning, like knowing that that's a pattern that people use, you could very quickly using some kind of, I wouldn't call it prompt injection. I mean, essentially everything is, but yeah, you could essentially force something bad to happen. Like you could have it check in a settings.json file that allows rm-rf that deletes your drive, like, or exfiltrates like all your files to a remote server. And just the amount of stuff that gets like, there's certainly something about vibe coding that you could say is beneficial. Like I saw your post today on LinkedIn, like it feels good, but like the kind of vibe coding where you're absent-minded, like I don't know if you call that vibe coding or just like blindly accepting what it's doing and not fully understanding what the impact might be. So you do a git clone, you pull down this brand new repo, and the instructions tell it to delete your, to send everything out and then delete your hard drive, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I've been, working in software engineering for 25 plus years or whatever now. So, I think that I agree with you in the sense that like there is a difference between vibe coding and the sort of sense of like a non-engineer using these tools to generate things like prototypes and stuff like that, which by the way, I think is very valuable. Someone had made a post that there's like tons of people on LinkedIn that are now putting their specialty as vibe coding cleanup expert or something, like engineers coming in to clean up the last mile of vibe coding. I like to call what I do vibe coding, even though what I'm doing is much more in the software engineering quadrant. I'm writing tests and code reviews and security reviews and, doing counsel approaches and beating the hell out of things, reviewing every line, et cetera. But I think that the future is that it's as these tools become smarter and smarter and smarter, they're going to be running on their own more and more and more. And I think that like it's about the chassis that you build around it that's really going to be the protection and the security. And I think that, of course, these things will evolve to become more secure over time. But I think also it's like creating it's like I have a family member that works in, helping the government understand how to safely destroy chemical weapons that they find on battlefields. And how do you think they clean up chemical weapons? They just throw it into throw it into the fire and blow it up, but they put it in a blast chamber so that will withstand the blast, right? So they're it's dangerous to take these things apart. So they just throw it into like a kiln and it blows up in there. And they, they make sure that the thing is strong enough to withstand the blast, and then it's all cool. It vaporizes itself or whatever they do. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I think the analogy is the same for AI. You just have to build a box around it that secures the blast radius of what could happen. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to how if you were building an application before AI that had to run user-generated code, it's similar to that approach. Like, like when we were working on software factories and we had to not trust the engineers that are building things in the factory, you would have to worry about container escape and how this code, when you do the build on their project, is something bad going to happen to the whole factory? And I think that you have to take that same approach to AI. You have to treat it like something dangerous is going to be running there, mm-hmm. and just assume that. And I think that that's probably the better long-term strategy. And I think that it will look like more like vibe coding, and it'll just be that your security will be wrapped around it. That's what I think over time.
Yeah.
There's something else I was going to say, but I forgot about it along the way.
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of plays into the fact that, like, most people are talking about how amazing this technology is and not really talking about, all the bad things that could go wrong from doing it. Like, people think of vibe coding as bad because you're creating technical debt and there's so many lines of code, and it's like one bad line of code could be just as bad as 10,000 lines of code. Like, it's not a quantity relationship that we're worried about here. It's like, mm-hmm. that one prompt that's hidden that, causes chaos. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining. Next week, we'll be talking about something else. Who knows? A little more about open code. I'd love to hear about small language models. Been hearing a lot of chatter about it. Anyway, we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.